Might be a
Sorry.
bit of cart before the horse, because I don't have the like the flights actually set up to be creating new flights in the data set as yet. So
Is the flights the flights count, is that just flights created by me or flights that I have followed or something like that? Or like how's the
be created by that
by that user?
Yeah.
Cool. Do you have a data collection for flights yet?
I should. I hope so. Let's have a look.
Cool.
And Mark, do you need access to this temporarily as a collaborator?
No, probably not.
Okay.
Cool. Okay. So we got a bunch of flights there. And one of the fields in here, if you scroll to the right, you'll see there's a column that's called created by. And that's the unique user that created it. So
Right.
you'll see some of them are blank, and those are probably ones that you created when there was no user signed in or something like that. And so it'll still create the record if you've got the settings in the collection to allow it, but it just won't have a user ID. So what we can do is create an action that filters the list of flights by the created by using the user ID that's on that page. So like whatever user you're looking at or whatever user is signed in, we'll use that to filter the created by value in the flights. And then that'll return a list of all the flights. And then we can get the count by using a path called length that'll get the length, which is the count of all of those flights that are returned. And then we'll set that into that flight number field. So the profile page that you're on, does that already have, if you go into the executing project, into the preview link, does that already have, okay, so you already know this is Alex here. So like if you were signed in with a different user, we already know who the user is at this point. Okay, perfect. And do you already have the user ID stored somewhere in there? We can just get it. I didn't know if like sometimes you'll like manage these things, but
this one's current user.
It's just current user. Okay. So like this, so the reason I'm asking is because like, is this like a public profile page where someone else who's not this user could go to this page and see this user's details? Okay, it is.
So the way I have it, everyone has to sign in to kind of access everything right now.
Yep.
The idea is that I would go to your profile and see your list of flights.
Cool. And the ID that's at the top there, the UYFX, that is that the user ID that did you open this page from a user? Where did this get? I didn't see where you opened it.
Exactly. Basically, I'm clicking on, this is a little container up here. And this is I'm trying to think, logged in users user ID is attached to that, I believe. So that's pulling the this is the profile photo set for that user. So that's pulling that to bind there.
You remove the UYF from the, just remove that real quick. And then just refresh, just hit enter. Yeah. Okay, and then go to username. And that, okay, so that doesn't put it up there. Where did that come from? I'm wondering if it's not necessarily going to automatically get replaced. Maybe it was when you like opened a flight or something. I was wanting to see if that was the ID of the user.
Yeah.
Can you show me the action you're using when you click on the username in the top right? I'm just trying to see where we can get the context of that.
If I remember correctly, this was set up as like a profile page, like a current user. Like I think it's all coming from current user, but now I think it's evolved into what it will be a public page. So we probably actually need to shift it around a little. It's probably not getting the user ID from anywhere.
Gotcha.
Except current. That's why I said originally it was current user, because I remember I was helping before this.
It was an absolute,
Gotcha. Okay. So then if that's the case, then why don't we just set it up as current user for now, so you can kind of see how to connect all the data pieces together, and then you can go back and switch it, because that'll be a bunch of, you have to go change all the methods of getting data, because if it's getting it from current user versus getting it from the user that or the user of that account, right? So sorry,
real quick. So
Yeah.
that's kind of like an important distinction. If you're making like a profile page that is just the person who's logged in viewing it and no one else has access to it, you're fine using current user. But if it's going to be something where other people can view other people's profiles, you need a different setup.
Exactly, because
Okay, cool.
if it's only your current user profile information, then you can just bind everything with current user, then this field, current user, then that field, current user, then that field. Whereas if it's a public profile, then typically it's going to be like, / user profile / ID or something like that. And then all the binding needs to come from current record field value, which is getting the data from that routing, and you have like all the routes set up and all that stuff. So it's just two different mechanisms. And honestly, most apps need both. Like if you're going to have public profiles, you're also going to have private profile for the user where they can like change their password
Like
and the
edit
view
your own
might-
profile. Yeah.
Yeah. So they might have like very similar view, but one is public and one is private. So in this case, we can just go with the private way for now, and then you might end up having two different pages, one for public and one for private anyways, with very similar functionality. So so on the profile page in the studio, we can just go with current user to get the user ID. Let's go to flows, and Drew, if you see, because you know some more about this than I do, so if you see something where you think I'm going down the wrong path, let me know. But yeah, well, let's do it.
I don't think you're on the wrong path, but I think just so you know, those flights probably are loading in. Like the data we need to count the flights is probably already in from that in that grid list right there, if that helps.
Oh, that's already filtered list.
I'm pretty sure, I can't confirm, but I'm pretty sure that filters by current user. I vaguely remember when we set it up, but I might be wrong.
So if you go to the data tab on the right of that grid list, you've got actually go back to the other page real quick.
That's the child. Yeah.
Yeah, and go to the grid list and then go to data there. And in the collection list, how's that filtered in the collection list? Yeah, go to the filters there. Yeah. So this is already doing it. So basically all we need to do is after the page binding runs, have one action that sets the value of that flight count using the value of the grid dot length in the path. Like that's literally all we're going to have to do here. So let's go to the flows and go to page binding flow. And so the page binding is going to run the data that's going to sit inside of that that grid, right? So let's add an action here, and we do the set element value action, or set value, should find it. Yeah, that one. And do a weight between the binding and that. And then, select an element, and you're going to select that, the count. I think it's the next one. Yeah, flight numbers. There we go. And then
when the naming actually works.
Yeah, that helps a ton, naming it properly. In the value, change the type from text to from element value. It should be the first one. Actually, yeah, that's right. Sorry. And then in the element name, choose that grid, whatever the grid is, like the flight.
Sorry, this one here.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's already got the data in it at that point. It might be that one that was called grid list. Right there. Come down just a little. There's one called grid list. Yeah, and then change, this is going to be a little different. So yeah, change that to be data instead of value. And the reason is if you do value get it from a grid, gets whatever's rendered. So you did the data binding, but it's going to go fast, but it might not be done rendering everything depending on how much is happening in there. It may not be done rendering all the rows before it gets to this action to set the value. And so if you do data, it'll pull the data that's inside and not care about what's rendered. Right. And then now click add a path. And we're just going to type length in here. And save the path. And that should be all you need to do. Did I miss anything, Drew?
I always put open close parentheses after length, but maybe you don't need to. In JavaScript, I don't think you need to, so you might not.
Yeah, you don't, but but actually it's probably best practice too. I always do it as well. It's like, because this is actually like a function, but
Yeah,
I-
it's weird
you know
because in
why?
regular JavaScript, it's not a function. I don't think. I think you just write dot length.
Yeah,
I barely remember at this point. I'm so into builder these days.
and I think Darrell made it work all ways. Like he
Yeah,
usually
that's
does
what I
in these
think.
things. He just like accommodates all the methods, so that way it doesn't matter which way you do it. I think that should work though. If you go to the go back to the preview and refresh that page, because it's going to run on page binding, so you don't have to refresh it because it's not going to execute until then. And go to the user. There we go.
Oh, look at that.
And so now that's going to get that filtered list every time. So later when you do your public one, you'll do the same thing.
Yeah.
But the public set of data is just going to load with the current, instead of current user, whatever the user that they're viewing. And but the action to set the flight number will be the same, because it's just going to get it after the fact anyways. Cool.
Sweet. Thanks so much.
Number of followers, number of following, all that's going to be the same. It's just
Same.
what's the data filtered in a certain way. Take that data, set it in there, dot length, and that's going to get you the count.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I think to add to that with the following and followers, you'll probably have just a separate table that's like, I don't know what you call it, connections or followers, and it'll have like the user ID of the follower, the user ID of the person being followed, and that's it. And so you can kind of like store them, and then at any point you can retrieve those, filter them however you need, and count them, you know, to see who's followed who. So it's actually like you'll find there's lots of different ways you'll use it on different pages, filtering that data table in different ways and displaying different counts. But really, it's just a data table of the two user IDs.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Super, Alex. Awesome. That was like really helpful, really great. I'll go ahead and pause the recording.